Welcome to the tutorial on self-flushing, also known as chaser batches, in DSL's AutoPilot4Feed control system. Self-flushing batches are designed to reduce cross-contamination in the weighing, mixing, batching part of a plant. So when there is a batch with contaminating materials and the next batch would have a problem with any residue from the first one, some of the batch is held back and follows on just afterwards to help clean out the plant. This second part of the batch, which is held back, will only have non-contaminating materials and is typically about 500 kilograms for a 3-ton batch. The two parts of the batch, normally kept apart, then usually join up in the pellet press bin, and there'll be sufficient mixing before it eventually goes into the final finished product bin. So there are 3 ways that a self-flushing batch can be made. Automatically if the cross-contamination matrix requires it, and I'll show you that shortly. If it's the last batch in the production program, nothing else to get made, so the system doesn't know what the next batch will be, and normally there's going to be a delay anyway. Or you can manually force a chaser batch. So I've got here an example system, a fairly typical plant, and if I go into the production program, and what I've done is I've generated a trial product here, and if I set 3 tons to make, the batch size is 3 tons, I'll put in a destination, and I'll take off the hold. Now this is a 3-ton batch, and it's only got 3 tons to go, so therefore it will be the last batch to be made in the program. So if I press save, take off cycle hold, and so the first part of the batch starts to weigh, and you can see the system weighing up in the weighers. The batch box here says it's chaser part 1, and if I click on here, you can see here are the raw materials, and they requirements total up to 2.6 tons, because the chaser part of it will be 400 kilograms. So to let that batch go, I will just manually simulate the hand additives. So I've simulated tipping in the hand additives, so this part of the batch can now discharge. So you'll see the weighers discharge any moment. Right, so the main weighers are all empty now. They're just finishing their discharge, and now automatically the part 2 will start, and it says here chaser part 2. You might remember that the first part was red because it had some contaminating materials. This one is blue because it's fairly inert, and if I click on here, you can see that there are 3 raw materials: wheat feed, wheat and barley, totaling up to 400 kgs. So we'll let that continue, but I'll show you how to configure the chaser batch. If I go to configure, in this particular case it's configure self-flushing batch and the setup. So first of all, the batching line. Now this plant has only got 1 batching line, so it's just got 1, but you can have a different chaser batch for different batching lines. So this one will be 400 kgs. So chaser batches are enabled, and it'll have 3 materials. Now what it does is it looks for the 3 materials with the highest inclusion and scales them down to achieve a 400 kilogram second part, and then takes those off the first part of the batch. There are various other options here, and if you're not too sure what they mean, you could just click on it and then press the F1 help button. Chaser batches are only made if the batch is over 1000 kgs. Now, because our chaser part 2 has got wheat, barley and wheat feed in it, you might want to flush out the hand additives point, in which case you could add an extra material here, for instance something like limestone. You can force it to any scale and you can force any amount in, so that's purely to clean out things like hand additives points. And you can also make sure that the batch will have some suitable material to do the chasing with. You might want to say, oh well, the batch must have wheat feed in it, in which case you can put it in here. And down the bottom here there are some cross-contamination groups which you can disable the last day program batch. So my demonstration of my day program was the last batch, so you can disable it here for certain product types if you want to. Now there's another configuration you can also look at. If you go to Configure Self-Flushing Batch Specials, you can also set up some specials here, and I've set up a couple of examples. Special 1, it's enabled, 500 kilogram batch size, and it'll have two materials, 18 and 30, and you can see the inclusion levels here to make up to a 500 kilogram chaser batch. And this will happen automatically if the previous product has got a cross-contamination group 3 or 4. And here's an example of a second one, which is this case it's got 3 raw materials, 400 kgs, and if the product has got a cross-contamination group 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16. If I show you the change cross-contamination product matrix, this shows how chaser batches can be produced automatically. So for example, if the previous batch is a type 5 and then the next batch is say a type 3 broiler, so if the previous batch is 5, the next one is 5, 1, and if I press F1, the help button, then 1 means the contamination risk can be cleared by a self-flushing batch, and there are various other options there, but that will clear any cross-contamination problems if a chaser batch happens between those two batches. So just a summary on self-flushing or chaser batches. First of all, it takes longer to manufacture than a normal batch because there has to be a delay while the first part discharges before the second part can weigh up and then discharge. But it doesn't use any extra material, unlike a full flushing batch, so it doesn't have to recirculate or reuse any extra material. Because the two parts join up in the pellet press bin, it won't clear out the pellet press area. It doesn't clean the plant as well as a full flushing batch, of course, because it is only 400 or 500 kgs. You could force a material to flush out a hand additive station, which I just showed you, and there's lots of configurations options there. Thank you for your time in looking at this. As ever, if you want any assistance, please don't hesitate to contact DSL Systems. Thank you.